So friends, at this time, if you are one of our Torah holders for this night, we invite you to make your way up to our mid-level. As we do this, we move into an opportunity to bring Torah to the community this Shabbat of Acharei Mot, the Torah portion, literally translated after death. And so it calls us unto life. It calls us unto life with words that we'll read from, which teach us that the commandments that our Torah was given to us specifically to walk with it, to live by it. So friends, we'll invite you all in the congregation and wherever you are to please rise as we turn to take our Sefer Torah out of the ark.
שלושה דברים העולם עומד על שלושה דברים על שלושה דברים על שלושה דברים העולם עומד על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים על שלושה דברים על שלושה דברים על שלושה דברים העולם
We turn to words of dedication for our Torah scroll.
Our tradition teaches that each of us is commanded to write our own Torah scroll. Since ancient times, we have been taught to cherish the sacred text. Our people have clung to Torah scrolls in times of joy and in times of danger. The people of the book have persevered because we have recognized that this book is central to our existence. This night we dedicate this Sefer Torah in memory of those died at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators, in gratitude for those who miraculously survived and went on to choose life despite the overwhelming darkness they had experienced.
This night we dedicate this Sefer Torah to the generations that should have been, that were cut off, to the generations that grew despite all the attempts to stop them. For the stories of their lives that should have been, the stories of their lives that we carry in our hearts, we commit ourselves to finding life's meaning in the words of this scroll, in the story of this scroll, inspired by the stories of their lives.
Adonai, our God and God of all generations, may it be your will that each of us turns to be a letter in Torah, indelibly inscribed, a sacred letter, through our actions counted among all the Jewish people. In the name of this sacred community, we accept this Sefer Torah as a sacred possession in fulfillment of our obligations as the Jewish people. We turn now to pass the Torah down the line of all of our Torah carriers. Each person, each family standing here carries one, many people they remember, they admire, they carry, and will carry this Torah for. They'll share names of family members who were victims of the Shoah, names of family members who were survivors, and names of family members who were liberators. All of the stories sacred, part of the tradition of our people.
My grandparents, Marcia Lane and Michael Lane. My cousins, Ava Foti, George Foti, Souza Gabor.
my grandparents, Beth Heimlich and Lawrence Heimlich, my great-grandparents, Marcus Heimlich and Zali Heimlich, and Sari Klein Heimlich.
My grandparents, Sarah Moskovic and Wolf Moskovic, my aunt and uncle, Ava Richter and Jack Richter.
My cousins, Dr. Andre Weiss and Dr. Melchior Weiss.
Our father, Benjamin Garber, our grandparents, Lisa Garber and Dan Garber, and Jonah Markman, our great-grandmother, Rivka Gleiser, our great-aunt and great-uncle, Simon Garber and Miriam Garber.
My father, Marv Bilfeld, he was born with the name Moishe. My grandparents, Shabsa and Malka Bilfeld, they're all survivors. And the people that are victims, Avraham Bilfeld, Chana Bilfeld, Clara Bilfeld, Yisrael, and Hirschvi Bilfeld.
We carry this for our parents, Margot and Howard Walton, our grandparents, Elsie and Ludwig Walton, and Metta and Max Strauss, our Aunt Edith Hausman, and for Ruth and Rudolph Mose, who saved our mom and aunt.
My grandfather, Herman Schambach.
My uncle, Murray Ginsburg.
I carry this scroll for my husband, Kurt Rothschild, my loving companion, Edgar Rose, my parents, Rennie and Arthur Rayfield, my in-laws, Risha and Louis Rothschild, my grandparents, Rebecca and Morris Rayfield, and my Catholic grandfather, Albert Getz.
This scroll for my parents, Werner Meyer and Vera Meyer, my sister, Kate Laura M. Guerin, my grandmothers, Rose Carper and Clara W. Meyer and siblings, my aunt, Martha Kameen, my uncle, Hans Carper, my great-uncle, James J. Wolfe.
I carry this scroll for my parents, Ann Lenga and Morris Lenga. You read the rest.
For Bobby's grandparents, her step-grandmother, and her uncles and her aunt who perished in the Holocaust.
I hold this scroll for my great Aunt Valerie, my cousin Jenny, my great uncle Ezra, my cousin Joseph, and my great grandmother Laura Hirschfeld.
I carry this scroll for my mother-in-law Judith N. Pressman and my father-in-law Murray M. Pressman and their children of the Holocaust, Dr. Norman Pressman and Dr. Ellen Pressman.
carry this scroll for our mother, Sala Lewis, our grandparents, Simon Menlovich and Eva Menlovich, our aunts and uncles, Dora Winyers and Irving Winyers, Philip Menlovich, David Menlovich, Carol Menlovich, Joseph Menlovich, Toby Menlovich, Henry Menlovich, and Kalish Menlovich.
I carry this scroll from my parents, survivors, Basha Zaunchkuska Rubenstein and Morris Rubenstein. For my grandparents, Edith Zaunchkuska and Joseph Zaunchkuski. My father's parents, my grandparents, Cyril Rubenstein and Leibish Rubenstein. My aunts and uncles I never got to meet, Manya Zaunchkuska, Tasha Zaunchkuska, Regina Zaunchkuska, Rose Zaunchkuska, and David Rubenstein.
I carry the scroll for survivor, my mother, Ruth Schorsch Herzog, my aunt, Marianne Schorsch Wolfson, and my grandparents, who I never got to meet, Martha Kahn Schorsch and Jerry Schorsch, my great-grandmother, Anna Kahn, and about 40 other ancestors who we never met.
I carry this scroll for my father, a survivor, Dr. George Noe, and I carry this scroll for my great-grandmother, grandfather, and 3 of their 7 children.
I carry this scroll from my great-aunt, Magdalena Iskowich Friedman, her son Moses, and his wife Sarah Weiss, and their children, Renata, age 6, and Adita, age 4.
I carry the scroll for my parents, Adolf and Hilda Samuel, my sister, Ruth G. Nissenschau Samuel, and my grandmothers, Regina Samuel and Paula Zemak.
As we stand with this community who carries this Torah literally from one to the next, in memory of, in honor of their family members, we call to mind all of our own family members, those whose names we carry, those whose names we never knew and never will, and all of the people whose names were lost. We carry this Torah in their honor, in their memory, that their legacy continues with us every time we read from this scroll. Let their memories live. It is a tree of life. We turn now to process this scroll through the congregation, where it will be read from for the first time.
Lecha Adonai hagedula v'hagevura v'tiferet v'hanetzach v'hakod ki kol bashamayim uvaretz ki kol bashamayim uvaretz Lecha Adonai hamamlacha v'amit naseh lechol lerosh Yismechu hashamayim hashamayim Yismechu hashamayim hashamayim Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz Yismechu hashamayim hashamayim Yismechu hashamayim hashamayim Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz Yiramayam 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 umro'o Yiramayam 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 umro'o Yiramayam Yiramayam Yeramayam umlo'o. Yeramayam, Yeramayam, Yeramayam umlo'o. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim. V'tagil haaretz. Uromemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachvu k'hadom raglav. Kadosh hu, Kadosh hu. Uromemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachvu l'har kodsho. Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu. Ki Kadosh Adonai. Romemu.
As mentioned before, we find ourselves in the Torah portion, Acharei Mot, one of the very centralmost Torah portions of the Torah. Next week's Torah portion, Kedoshim, being the centermost Torah portion. And this week's Torah portion, really, which introduces us, the Holiness Code, offers us ancient guides to what it means to make our world a holy place through living Jewishly, particularly Jewishly. And it couldn't be more bashert that this would be the Torah portion that we would find this Shabbat as we dedicate this Torah. This is a Torah portion about what it means to live in a world full of people who have all sorts of unique practices, but to claim your own particular Jewish life and to live in it, to walk in it fully, proudly, with holiness. So as we read from these words of Torah, we invite our Torah carriers to be our leaders of the blessings before and after. So Torah carriers, you have the words of the blessing on the back of your cards. Everyone else in the congregation is invited into our part of the affirmation of that blessing if you know it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, and God spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, v'amarta alehem, and say to them, Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am Adonai your God. K'ma'aseh eretz Mitzrayim asher yashavtem ba, like the land of Egypt where you used to live, lo ta'asu. Don't act in those ways. Uchma'aseh eretz Canaan asher ani mevi etchem shama lo ta'asu. And like the land that I'm taking you to, don't follow those practices there either. Uvkotechem lo telechu et mishpatai ta'asu ve'et chukotai tishmoru lalechet bahem ani Adonai. My rules, my statutes, these are what you are to protect, to walk in them. Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am Adonai, your God. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Baruch atah. Yasher Koach to all of our Torah carriers. There are up here amongst you not only people remembering their own loved ones, but there are survivors themselves who stand here. Every person here carries at least one story or many for themselves, of their family members, of their family's story. And everyone here has the opportunity to recognize a face, ask a question. It's how we keep our stories alive. To each and all of you, we are grateful for you being here. We are excited that this day marks the beginning of our use of this Torah scroll in our congregation on a regular basis. Our B'nai Mitzvah will read from it. Our congregation will use it at the High Holy Days. From time to time, it will no longer sit at the top of that ark, where it sat in a very protected way for about 50 years, but it will come into our main section of Torahs, and we'll be able to bring its words to life. And every time we do, it will carry with it all that it has witnessed, everything that it has known, and be alive for us here in this community. Amen. We'll invite you to rise as we return the scroll to the ark.
Etz Chaim hi למחזיקים בה את המחווה וכל נתיבותיך השיבנו אדוני
אליך ונשובה
אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם
We'll stay standing as we turn to Aleinu, page 282.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו